I never imagined I'd be standing here today, telling the world how my own brother, the person I trusted more than anyone, shattered my life. You see, it wasn't just money we lost. It was the bond, the childhood memories, the late-night talks about dreams and futures, all gone like ashes in the wind. I remember the morning it all came crashing down. It was just a regular Tuesday, or so I thought. I didn't know that when I picked up the phone, it would be the last time I heard his voice before everything spiraled out of control. There was a tremor in his words, something off. But I ignored it. I trusted him. I always had. What's worse is not just the betrayal. It's the silence that followed. The unanswered calls, the cold messages, the empty chair at Thanksgiving where he used to sit laughing beside me. I can still feel the weight of that absence, like a ghost in the room. And here's the part that keeps me awake at night. Was there a moment when I could have stopped it? Could I have seen the signs, the lies beneath his smile, the slow unraveling of our family's trust? This is not just a story of losing money. It's a story of losing a brother, a confidant, a piece of myself. And yet, even in the bitterness, a part of me still hopes. Hopes that maybe one day he'll walk back through that door. If you've ever faced betrayal, if you've ever wondered how someone so close could leave you in ruins, stay with me. Hit that like button, share your story in the comments, and subscribe, because together we'll face the pain, the truth, and maybe even find a way to heal. I woke up to the soft glow of morning light slipping through the blinds, streaking across the floor in pale ribbons. For a moment, I lay still, the weight of the blankets pressing into me, the world outside quiet and still. I didn't know, I couldn't have known, that this was the last morning I'd wake up feeling whole before everything cracked open beneath my feet. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with his name, Ben. Without hesitation, without even thinking, I smiled. That's how it is with the people you love, the ones you trust with every fragile part of yourself. A name lights up your phone, and you don't brace for impact. You let it in. "Hey," he said when I answered, his voice breathless, like he'd been running. "Can we meet up later? I need to talk." There was something in his tone, a strain, a tremor, but I brushed it off. Ben was always busy, always juggling too many things at once. "Sure," I said easily, my heart light. "You name the time." At breakfast, I found myself pulling out the old photo albums, something I hadn't done in years. There we were, two kids in muddy sneakers, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning like idiots. There was a picture of us at the beach, sand stuck in our hair, sunburned noses. Another one in Halloween costumes, fake vampire teeth poking from our mouths as we doubled over in laughter. I smiled at the memories, not knowing they would soon taste like ash. What could possibly go wrong between us? We were brothers. We were unbreakable. The day drifted by in a haze. I ran errands, checked emails, let time slip through my fingers without noticing. I didn't think much of it when he didn't text back right away to confirm the time. I just assumed, as always, that Ben was busy, that we'd figure it out. By evening, I was sitting at the cafe we always met at, the little place on 5th with chipped mugs and the best pie in town. I watched the door, watched people come and go, but not him. I checked my phone, no message. I called, straight to voicemail. At first, it was a mild annoyance. "Come on, Ben, where are you?" But as the minutes dragged on, something inside me began to shift. A knot, small at first, tightened in my chest. I scrolled through our texts, looking for something I might have missed, a clue, a reason. By the time the cafe closed and I walked out into the cold night, the knot had grown into a fist pressing hard against my ribs. I stood on the sidewalk, phone in hand, staring at his name on the screen. I told myself it was nothing, that he'd call tomorrow, that this wasn't the start of anything. I told myself a lot of things that night, but deep down, even then, I think part of me already knew something was wrong, something was breaking, and soon nothing would ever be the same. The days blurred, one into the next, and still no word from Ben. At first I was angry, furious, really. Who makes plans and then just vanishes? I replayed every conversation we'd had in the past month, trying to convince myself this was just Ben being careless, unreliable, the way he sometimes was. But beneath the anger, something darker was curling its way into my chest. Worry. I swung like a pendulum between the two. Anger one moment, panic the next. The silence was unbearable. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, only to sink again when it wasn't him. I kept telling myself, he'll call any minute now. But the minutes stretched into hours, the hours into days. It was Mom who cracked first. She called on the third day, her voice trembling on the line. "Have you heard from Ben?" she asked softly, as if saying his name too loud might break her. The second I heard her voice, the panic that had been gnawing at me became real. It wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to her, too, to all of us. "No," I whispered, my throat dry. "Not yet." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the lights dimmed low, and tried to retrace every conversation, every memory, every tiny detail. Had he been trying to tell me something? Had I missed a sign? I remembered the strained tone in his voice the last time we spoke, the way he'd rushed through the call. I remembered the way he hadn't looked me in the eye the last time we met for coffee, how he'd fidgeted with his keys, tapping them nervously against the table. Why hadn't I noticed then? By the fourth night, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to his place. His apartment building sat still and dark, the windows like blank eyes staring back at me. His car was there, parked crookedly in the driveway, just as it had been for days. I knocked on his door, waited, knocked again. Nothing. The walls seemed to close in on me as I stood there, heart pounding. Was this just Ben being flaky? Or was this something darker? That night, the old anxieties came rushing back, the ones I thought I'd buried deep, the memories of Dad disappearing for days without a word, the nights Mom would sit by the window with the lights off, waiting. Friends began to notice. They started whispering, asking questions I didn't have answers for. "Have you heard from Ben? Is everything okay?" I smiled tightly, forced out a, "Yeah, he's just busy." But the truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. And then came the moment that knocked the breath from my lungs. One morning, bleary-eyed and exhausted, I logged into my bank account. And there it was. Thousands. Gone. Drained without a trace. The ground shifted under me, sharp and sudden. My hands trembled over the keyboard. My heart roared in my ears. What was happening? Where was Ben? And why? Why did it feel like the cracks in our family's foundation were about to swallow me whole? I barely recognized the person staring back at me in the mirror. My eyes were sunken, the skin beneath them bruised with exhaustion. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white, shoulders tight with a weight I couldn't shake. My breath fogged the glass, and for a moment I almost expected to see someone else's reflection, some stranger who had slipped into my life when I wasn't looking. But no, it was still me, or what was left of me. The next morning, I went to the bank. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for the manager, the polite woman with the careful smile. I clutched the papers in my hand, the numbers I didn't understand, the transactions I couldn't explain. She led me into a small office and closed the door. "We've been trying to reach you," she said gently, as if that softened the blow. "There were large transfers, multiple accounts." I couldn't breathe. And then the name, Ben. My mind reeled. "No," I wanted to say. "Not him. Not the boy who once gave me the last slice of pizza. Not the brother who used to stand between me and the world." But the evidence was there, cold and merciless. Panic blurred into betrayal. My stomach twisted. How long had this been happening? How many times had we sat across from each other, laughing, while he slipped the knife in just a little deeper? I stopped sleeping. At night, I lay in bed, replaying every conversation, every hug, every casual, "Don't worry about it," that now sounded like a warning I'd failed to hear. I called his friends, desperate for answers, desperate for someone to tell me this was all a mistake. But they were just as confused. Their voices were careful, their pity seeping through the phone like poison. "I haven't seen him," one said. "Are you okay?" "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding," another offered, the lie thin and brittle. I found myself in his apartment one night, standing in the doorway, surrounded by his life. His clothes, his books, his shoes by the door, all perfectly in place. But the air felt wrong. The rooms felt hollow, like a stage set waiting to be torn down. And then, at 3 a.m., my phone lit up. A voicemail. I listened in the dark, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Heavy breathing. A whisper, so faint I almost missed it. "I'm sorry." And then, silence. I sat there, clutching the phone, shaking. Had I missed the signs because I loved him too much? Or was it worse? Had I chosen not to see, blindfolding myself with trust because the truth was too painful to face? And if I'd opened my eyes sooner, would any of this have changed? Thanksgiving arrived like an unwelcome guest, pressing itself into every corner of the house. I remember the smell of turkey in the oven, the faint scent of cinnamon from the pies, the laughter on TV from some old holiday movie we always watched. But all of it, every bit, felt hollow, like we were actors trapped in a scene none of us wanted to perform. His chair was there, at the table, just like always. Only this year, it sat empty. I couldn't stop looking at it, the way the cushion was still slightly indented from the last time he sat there. The way his name card, one Mom always put out even though we didn't need them, was tucked neatly beside the plate. It should have been comforting, but it wasn't. The silence coming off that chair was louder than anything we'd ever shouted at each other. I walked into the kitchen to grab another bottle of wine, and that's when I saw her. Mom, standing by the sink, her shoulders trembling. She was facing the window, dabbing at her eyes with a dish towel, but I saw it before she could hide it. She turned when she heard me, forcing a smile so brittle I thought it might snap. "We'll be okay," she whispered. "We'll be okay." But we weren't. The house felt different, not in a way you could name, but in the way you feel in your bones, like walking into a room and sensing you've forgotten something important, like the air is just a little too heavy, like the walls are pressing in, like the house itself is waiting for something that isn't coming back. I wandered upstairs later that night, restless, unable to sleep. I found myself in the guest room, the one where Ben used to stay when he came over. His old sweatshirt was still folded on the chair, faintly smelling of him. I don't even know why I did it, but I started opening drawers, searching for something, anything. That's when I found it. An old letter, yellowed and creased, stuffed in the back of a drawer. His handwriting on the front. For you. My hands were trembling as I unfolded it. I'll always have your back. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could barely read them through the tears blurring my eyes. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the paper, feeling like the walls were closing in. Betrayal doesn't always come with a bang, I realized. Sometimes it's a slow, quiet erasure. The unanswered calls, the missed dinners, the holidays where one chair stays empty. Sometimes it's not the fight that ruins you. It's the absence. The cold, aching absence that fills every corner of your life until you wonder if you ever knew the person at all. I don't remember when the days started to blur, when the sharp edges of life softened into something I could barely hold on to. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't eaten in 2 days. My fridge was nearly empty, the lights off in rooms I no longer bothered to enter. Work emails went unanswered, meetings skipped, the polite concern of coworkers slowly hardening into silence. I told myself I was handling it, that I just needed time. But the truth was, I was slipping, not just in the practical sense, but somewhere deeper, somewhere darker. I hired a lawyer. I thought that would be the turning point, the moment things would shift back toward justice, toward resolution. But when I sat across from her in that cold, gray office, she gave me a look I'll never forget, part pity, part warning. "It's hard to go after family in cases like this," she said gently, her fingers tapping the side of her coffee cup. "The courts. They don't want to get involved in sibling disputes, especially when the paper trail's thin." Sibling disputes. Is that what this was? I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. This wasn't a spat over inheritance or borrowed tools. This was betrayal. This was a knife between the ribs. My friends, at first, were supportive. They called, they texted, they invited me out, trying to pull me back into the world. But as the weeks wore on, their voices softened, their invitations stopped. People didn't know what to do with long-term grief, with the kind of sadness that doesn't tidy itself up after a few weeks. And then came the dreams. Some nights I dreamed of Ben the way I remembered him, smiling, sunlit, reaching for me across a table, laughter bubbling between us. I'd wake up with tears on my face, the pillow wet, a momentary sweetness in my chest before the crushing weight of reality slammed back down. Other nights, the dreams were darker, him turning away from me, his face shadowed, eyes cold, or worse, him laughing at me, counting bills, disappearing into a crowd as I called out his name. Those were the nights I woke up shaking, drenched in sweat, my heart galloping in my chest. Sometimes I'd find myself walking past his old apartment, even though I knew he was long gone. I told myself I was just passing by, but deep down I knew. I was hoping, always hoping. And then, one night, as I was cutting through a busy street downtown, I saw him. Just a flash, the back of his head, the slope of his shoulders, the way he moved through the crowd. My heart leapt, racing faster than it had in weeks. I pushed forward, weaving between strangers, my mouth dry, my hands shaking. "Ben!" I wanted to shout, but my voice caught. And then he turned. It wasn't him. The crash was instant, brutal, like falling through ice, the cold rushing in, swallowing me whole. I stood there on the sidewalk, stunned, breathless, asking myself the question I couldn't shake. Is it worse to be robbed of your money or of your faith in someone you love? I started writing to Ben on a Thursday night, sitting at the kitchen table where the overhead light hummed softly above me. It wasn't planned. I hadn't thought, "I'm going to write to my brother today." It just happened. The pen was in my hand, the paper waiting, and the words poured out. I told him about the hole he left behind, about the silence that clung to the house like damp air, about how I sat on the edge of my bed every night, wondering where we went wrong. I confessed things I hadn't even admitted to myself, the small resentments I'd buried, the moments I should have spoken up, the warnings I should have seen. I apologized for things I shouldn't have. I said sorry for not being the brother he needed, for not noticing the cracks beneath his smile. I wrote as if my words could change something, could pull him back across the chasm he'd created between us. Page after page, I poured myself out, bargaining with ghosts, bargaining with a version of Ben that no longer existed, if he ever had. One night, after writing for hours, I stared at the neat stack of letters on the table. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for them, feeling the weight of my own desperation. Without thinking, I carried them to the fireplace. The flames swallowed the first page eagerly, the edges curling black as the fire licked across my careful handwriting. I stood there, feeding letter after letter to the flames, watching the words twist and vanish, reduced to smoke and ash. It felt symbolic, but also pointlessly small, like trying to erase a storm with a match. For days afterward, the house smelled faintly of smoke. No matter how many windows I opened, how much air freshener I sprayed, the scent lingered. It clung to the curtains, to my clothes, to the walls themselves. It was a reminder. No matter how much I tried to burn away, I couldn't undo what had been done. Then came the call from my lawyer. I was sitting on the front steps, watching the sun dip behind the trees, when my phone buzzed. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the weariness underneath. "We've traced some of the funds," she said carefully, "but recovery is unlikely." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, closing my eyes. My throat felt tight, my heart heavy in my chest. Unlikely. That word hung between us like a verdict. I thanked her, though I don't know why. I hung up, staring at the screen for a long time before slipping the phone into my pocket. I wondered what Ben would say if he knew, if he cared, if there was even a flicker of guilt in him somewhere, or if he'd buried it so deep it no longer touched him. I wondered, did he ever think about me at all? Or was I just another letter, burned and forgotten? I walked into that room trembling. Not the kind of trembling you can see from the outside. No, this was deeper, a shaking in my bones, a rattling in my chest. The air smelled sterile, sharp with bleach and old sweat, the harsh fluorescent lights humming above, flickering just slightly. It was the kind of place where nothing good ever happens. And then there he was, Ben. But not the Ben I remembered. His face was thinner, paler, the skin stretched too tight over his cheekbones. His hair was longer, messier, like he hadn't cared to look in a mirror for weeks. And his eyes, God, his eyes darted everywhere, restless, like a trapped animal. I kept waiting for that familiar smile, the warmth that used to be effortless between us. But it never came. He sat across from me, his hands fidgeting on the table, fingers twisting together, knuckles white. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he said, his voice cracking, barely above a whisper. And I just sat there, staring. Because what do you say when your brother, your best friend, the one you trusted with your entire heart, looks you in the eye and says something like that? I wanted to rage, to stand up, shove the table aside, scream at him until my voice gave out. I wanted to throw every memory we had right back in his face. The birthday promises, the secrets, the nights we swore we'd always be there for each other. But all I felt was a hollow ache. He told me about the debts, the bad deals, the desperate choices that piled one on top of another until there was no way out. He spoke in circles, words tumbling out too fast, his voice shaking. He kept saying, "I didn't know what else to do," like that was supposed to soften the blow. But none of it erased the betrayal. I stared at the table, tracing a crack in the wood with my finger, feeling the weight of it all press down on me. There was so much I wanted to say, but no words felt big enough, sharp enough, to cut through the thick silence between us. We sat there for a long time, just breathing, just being, in the same space again, after so much absence, so much damage. I kept wondering if he could feel it too, the space between us, wide as an ocean. Finally, he stood. He looked at me one last time, eyes glassy, mouth trembling, and then he walked away. I sat frozen in that chair, staring at the door after it clicked shut. And the strangest part? I felt both relief and devastation. Relief that the waiting was over, that I'd faced him finally after all this time, and devastation that nothing we said, nothing we did, could stitch us back together. Not now. Maybe not ever. Winter came hard that year, settling over everything like a heavy blanket, muffling sound, dulling light. The cold wasn't just outside. It seeped into me, bone deep, until I couldn't tell where the chill of the season ended and the chill inside me began. I packed away the photos first. One by one, I slid them into a box, fingers trembling a little as I touched each image. Childhood birthdays, summer road trips, goofy Halloween costumes, smiles frozen in time. I told myself it was just practical, clearing space, making room, but really, I was trying to survive. Every glance at his face on the wall was another small cut, and I was tired of bleeding. The keepsakes followed. The baseball glove he gave me when we were 12, the watch he'd left on my counter once and never came back for, the notes he'd scribbled on scraps of paper, shoved into my mailbox just because. Into the box they went, like burying pieces of a life I no longer knew how to live. And then came the friends. Slowly, hesitantly, they circled back. Coffee invitations, texts asking if I was okay, tentative smiles across crowded rooms. They didn't mention Ben much, maybe afraid it would break me, but their eyes always held the question, "Are you still missing him?" The truth was, I was always missing him. Even when I didn't say his name, he hovered at the edge of my thoughts. I'd walk into a room and half expect to see him sprawled on the couch, shoes kicked off, head thrown back in laughter. I'd hear a song on the radio we used to love and feel that sharp, familiar twist in my chest. By December, the world was dressed in white. The streets were lined with twinkling lights, stores played soft carols, and people hurried home with wrapped gifts tucked under their arms. I moved through it all like a ghost, touching nothing, feeling nothing. On Christmas Eve, I stood by the window, watching the snow fall in slow, silent sheets. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heater and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Outside, the world glittered under a silver moon, peaceful and cold. I pressed my hand to the glass, feeling the bite of the winter on the other side, and whispered into the dark, "Why wasn't love enough to save us?" I'd always believed it was, that no matter what we faced, no matter how hard things got, the love we had, the love we grew up inside, would hold, that it would catch us when we fell. But now, standing there in the hush of Christmas Eve, I realized love doesn't always save. Sometimes it watches from the sidelines, helpless, as everything you thought was unbreakable shatters right in front of you. And sometimes the hardest part isn't the breaking, it's living with the silence that follows. Therapy was not what I expected. I thought I'd sit across from a woman with kind eyes who'd give me a checklist of things to fix, a roadmap back to normal. But it wasn't like that. Instead, I sat in a too-quiet room on a couch that smelled faintly of lavender, and I talked about Ben, about the day he left, about the wreckage he left behind. And slowly, almost painfully, I began peeling back the layers I'd wrapped around myself. Grief, anger, shame, guilt. At first, I hated it. The rawness, the vulnerability. I hated admitting that I was angry, not just at Ben, but at myself. That maybe I should have seen the signs, should have asked more questions, should have been less trusting. But with each session, I began to see that healing wasn't about blame. It was about facing what hurt, not trying to outwalk it. Rebuilding my finances was its own kind of therapy. Slow, tedious, humbling. Every dollar mattered in a way it hadn't before. I had to start over, piece by fragile piece, learning patience when I wanted to rage, learning humility when I wanted to hide. Some days it felt like progress. Other days it felt like a cruel reminder of everything I'd lost. But I kept going, one small, painful step at a time. Grief, I learned, wasn't just about the money. It was about him, about the brother I used to know, or thought I knew. It was grieving the late-night phone calls, the shared jokes, the feeling that no matter what happened in life, I had someone in my corner. Now, that space felt hollow. It echoed when I laughed, when I succeeded, when I struggled. I reached out to Mom more. I hadn't realized how much she was carrying, too, her own quiet sorrow, her own confusion and heartbreak. We didn't talk about Ben all the time, but when we did, there was a softness in our voices, like we were touching something fragile, something we both missed, but didn't know how to hold anymore. And slowly, I learned to live with the ache. Not to erase it, I don't think you can erase something like that, but to carry it without breaking. Some mornings, the ache was just a whisper. Other days, it was a weight pressed into my chest. But either way, I kept moving forward, learning that pain could exist alongside joy, that healing didn't mean forgetting. Sometimes, late at night, I'd still check my phone, just in case. I'd see his name in old texts, scroll through messages from a lifetime ago, and wonder, would he ever come back? Would there ever be a knock at the door, a familiar voice on the other end of the line, an apology whispered into the space between us? I didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, I was learning to live without needing that answer. It had been a full year since the day I realized my brother wasn't coming back. Not to explain, not to apologize, not even to look me in the eyes one last time. I stood now at the edge of the ocean, my feet sinking slightly into the damp sand, the wind cold against my skin. The waves roared, relentless, pulling and pushing, a rhythm I had come to know well in the past months. I had come here often, as if the sea could carry away the heaviness in my chest, as if the salt in the air could scrub clean the parts of me that still bled. I closed my eyes and whispered his name, not as a curse, not as an accusation, just as a memory. Ben. It tasted strange on my tongue, like something old and worn, like the echo of a life I no longer lived. For so long, I had held on to the anger, clutched it close like armor, convinced it was the only thing keeping me upright. But here, standing before the vastness of the sea, I felt something loosen, I let out a shaky breath, and with it, the last threads of rage I had been dragging behind me like chains. I had learned something in the quiet, lonely nights of this past year. Not every wound comes with an explanation. Not every betrayal comes with a tidy ending. And some apologies, no matter how much we crave them, may never come. I opened my eyes, staring out at the horizon, the place where sky met water in a thin, trembling line. I thought about the boy Ben and I used to be, the two of us running along the shore as kids, daring each other into the waves, laughing until we couldn't breathe. I thought about the man he became, the choices he made, the ways he broke what I thought was unbreakable. And I understood now. Scars remain, but they don't have to define the whole of us. I turned slowly away from the sea, feeling the pull of my life waiting behind me. It wasn't perfect. It was still heavy with unanswered questions, still touched by grief. But it was mine. I could carry the pain and still walk forward. I could carry the hope, too. If you've ever been broken by someone you love, if you've ever stood where I stand, wondering how to move forward with a shattered heart, know this: you are not alone. We're stronger when we face the hard things together. So please, if this story touched you, if it made you remember your own loss, your own healing, hit that like button. Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And subscribe to join me on this journey of truth, of finding light even in the shadows. Because we are all carrying something, and none of us have to carry it alone.